Welcome to Guests and Gusto, SCAD's virtual series of conversations and digital content with the creators and innovators who are remaking culture. I'm Carl Rouse. I'm an Associate Dean here at SCAD in the School of Entertainment Arts, and I'm happy to introduce today Dustin Berry. Dustin graduated from SCAD in 2009 with a B.F.A in film and television, and today he's an Atlanta-based set buyer and decorator with more than 10 years of professional experience on more than 35 productions, including feature films such as Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, Hidden Figures, and Captain America, Civil War, as well as television series including The Haunting of Hill House, The Vampire Diaries, and Being Mary Jane. For Dustin, creating worlds centered on character and story is the most exhilarating and challenging form of design. And today he's going to share with us how he makes environments and characters come to life through dynamic set design, from research through to the final touches, and how he captivates the imagination with the art of visual storytelling. So welcome, Dustin. Before we start, we're going to do today's poll question. So you can have the chance to win the Be Happy Perry leather wallet pouch from Morgan Rea if you answer this question. Which aspect of Dustin's job would you most like to hear more about? Working with directors, creating storyboards, designing the sets, or researching the props? So after the conversation with Dustin, there will be time for you to ask questions to him. So feel free to use the chat to type in your questions and we'll come to you at the end, but you can type them in at any particular moment. But now we're ready to begin. So I'm going to hand over. Thank you so much, Dustin, and we're ready for you.
All right. Hello again, everyone. Thanks for that flattering intro, Carl. Once again, my name is Dustin, and I want to thank Lee and Carl, as well as SCAD, for asking me to be a part of their Guest and Gusto series. I think it's so awesome that they're doing these Zoom presentations during a pandemic to help us all stay connected creatively. I'm a huge fan of SCAD. They've helped me in many ways in the past, and I'm glad just to give back in any way possible and share any insight for current and prospective students, or just anyone that wants to listen. So it's nice to virtually meet all of you in this crazy COVID-19 world we're living in. Hopefully, no matter what your creative discipline is or your interests are, you've been able to stay strong and continue to create things and stay positive in these strange times we're all in together. So today, I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, how I got into the film business, what the art department is, and more specifically, what I do as a set decorator, which will segue into a couple presentations on 2 shows I've worked in, and what my approach is when creating a set. So I'm from a small little town in Northeast Tennessee called Bristol, but I've lived in Georgia for 16 years. 6.5 of that was in Savannah while at SCAD, and the rest has been here in Atlanta working in the film business. Currently, I'm in between seasons 3 and 4 of a medical drama called The Resident with 20th Century Fox. They've not issued a return to work date yet, but they're still working on the protocols and procedures for when we do get to go back. From an early age, I really fell in love with the arts. I was always doing something creative. For instance, a passion of mine was writing, directing, and production designing my own family plays. But as I grew older, my interest in set design, specifically for movies, really started to grow. The movie Titanic came out in '97, and I was just in awe of how they recreated that ship. The level of detail and the work just blew me away, so I was hooked at that moment. But closer to high school graduation, I naively thought that I wouldn't be able to make a good living in a creative field, so I cautiously went into pre-med school with the goal of being a pediatrician. Well, I hated everything about it. I failed chemistry 2 or 7 times. I was living at home. I was just miserable and honestly bored out of my mind. And I was complaining to my best friend constantly, who was a student at SCAD at the time, and she knew that I'd participated in the theater department in high school and that I love set design. So she recommended that I come to her SCAD. So that's what I did. I signed up for the next SCAD day. I toured the film department, took a tour of Savannah, and I knew at that moment in my heart that that's where I belonged. So I dropped out of med school. My mom had a brief freak out, and I started SCAD the following winter quarter in film and TV with a concentration in writing and directing. When I was a film student, we were under the impression that we needed to move to LA or New York in order to have a successful career. Well, thankfully, I discovered that's just not true. I've now worked on over 30 shows and have never worked outside of Georgia except for once for a commercial. As some of you probably know, Georgia is #1 filming destination in the world and has been for a few years now, surpassing New York and LA. That's due to our awesome tax incentives, the diverse filming locations, our huge crew base, and our infrastructure. So how I got my foot in the door. Just before graduation, there was talk around campus that a Disney movie was coming to Savannah called The Last Song, and they were looking for demo reels from SCAD students to choose a finalist to be an art department PA. Well, I'd been focusing mostly on finishing my senior film, and I didn't apply for it. And one day I ran into Professor Chris Auer at Hamilton Hall, who was also my senior film advisor and mentor, and he was like, "Hey, they're getting ready to choose a student for that Disney movie. You sent in your stuff, right?" Well, when he found out that I hadn't, I could tell he was pretty disappointed. Well, it turns out he knew the production designer on the movie from years and years ago when they worked on something together. And he called the guy up, they chatted for a bit, and he asked if I could start on the movie the following Monday. And that's really how my film career started. I really owe it to the strong relationship that I had made with this professor, and he and I are still in contact and friends today. One great thing about SCAD is the relationships you make here will be of great benefit after you graduate. So start cultivating them now. Meet as many people from as many different majors as possible because they will be your professional peers one day. Like I've told students before, if you're a film student, why not meet the fashion students that might be your costume designers for your project, or the production design students that could art direct your films, the sequential art students that could storyboard your films, and so on. You get my drift. There's so much cross collaboration in filmmaking, so the sooner you can develop this habit, the better off it'll serve you. I mean, when else in your life are you going to be surrounded by 10,000 plus creative, wacky art people in one place? So you might as well take advantage of it while you can. And this doesn't just pertain to film students. There's so many overlaps of creative fields out there. For instance, a lot of production designers, art directors, and set decorators I work with started out as architects, draftsmen, or interior designers and decided to make a career change for whatever reason, and now they have a career in Hollywood. And it's not just the relationships you make with students. As you can see from my story, SCAD faculty are for the most part still working within their field. They have a vast Rolodex of contacts and sources and can possibly assist you with your career in some way. If I hadn't ran into Professor Chris Auer that day, who knows what my career would look like today. So back to the Disney job. I wasn't really sure what the art department was or really even what a PA was, but I was eager, I was willing to learn and ask questions, and I started building new relationships, getting to know people, letting them know my skills, but listening and absorbing as much from as many of them as I could. And I still try to do that to this day. In this business, and probably a lot of creative fields, it is all in who you know. So network, network, network. This has been the backbone of my success in my career. When I go into an interview, the person interviewing me always wants to know who I've worked with, what names they recognize on my resume. And 9 times out of 10, after I leave that interview, they're going to call those people to get recommendations on whether or not they should hire me. So you really have to make a good name for yourself from the get-go. And SCAD assists you with this by showing you how to put an enticing demo reel together or a website to showcase your work. And honestly, just having that SCAD name and degree on your resume really does carry a huge weight. The college has so many great opportunities for you to meet with industry professionals like panels and discussions like this one, SCAD ATV Fest, the fashion show, the film festival, the SCAD career fair. I mean, the list goes on and on. So because of my networking, one project led to another, which led to another, and so on. And then I finally had my aha moment. I had been shadowing different set decorators on previous shows, and I was so intrigued by their job and seeing how they are required to be creative and fun in so many challenging ways. And I knew that this is what I wanted to do with my life, but I needed some more schooling. So I took some interior design grad classes at SCAD to get a better understanding and some technical skills like drafting, furniture styles, architectural styles and time periods. And all of these have been quite beneficial in the work that I do today. So enough about me. What is the art department? The art department is the largest department on any production, and it's responsible for creating the story visually in a multitude of ways. And it's made up of several sub-departments: set decorating, graphics, illustrators, storyboard artists, props people, set designers, the construction team, the paint and wallpaper department, custom fabricators, and the hair, makeup, and wardrobe staff. That's a mouthful. This can total well over 150 people in a large show. The art department leader, or the department head, is the production designer. This is a key position working closely with the director and the director of photography to design the overall look, tone, color palette, and style of the production. So what is a set decorator and what do we do? There's sort of a misconception out there that set decorators are interior designers. Well, that's somewhat true, but really that's just a small segment of what we do. What I personally love best about set decorating is the vast array of sets we're responsible for bringing to life. These can range from a circus, a spaceship, 1960s NASA offices, a meth lab, an outdoor African market, a small Western town. These are all sets that I've been asked to do on previous shows. And there's such an adrenaline rush of intently researching, becoming experts in a ton of areas of life, from people's occupations, their living habits, the psychology of why they make certain choices in their environments, all while racing against the clock before the shooting crew arrives and filming begins. And another thing that I really enjoy is we make all of our choices based on what we think that character would make in their lives and spaces. Often when we're given a script, the set or scene description is very vague, just 1 or 2 sentences. And then we as set decorators often have to fill in all those gaps and create our own backstory for that character or set, while at the same time fulfilling the vision of the production designer. I personally love coming up with the backstory. We really get to get creative here. Is the person messy? Are they neat? Do they collect weird things like ceramic cats? What social class are they a part of? Their economic status? Where are we geographically in the world? And if it's a period piece, like when I worked on Hidden Figures, what social or racial rules were in place at the time that we should take note of when designing and decorating the sets? And now more than ever, with HD TV and high-def cameras, every detail we put in the set, down to the salt and pepper shakers on a table or ink pens on a desk, will be seen. So every decision we make needs to make sense and needs to be accurate as possible. And a difference in what I do versus an interior designer is oftentimes our sets are not pretty. They can be very down and dirty. Like when I was asked to set up a smelly fish market on Jumanji, or put together an underground drug lord's den, or construct the ruins of downtown Boston after Godzilla destroyed it. We have to get very creative to make the audience believe that what they're viewing is reality. And our work should be a visual storytelling aid that helps the characters tell their story. And set decorators wear many hats. We are the interior designer. We're a logistics captain juggling multiple sets, sometimes 10 or more, in all phases of research, shopping, decorating, taking down the sets that have already been filmed, and also being on top of any custom items that are being fabricated for the sets. And we also have to be somewhat of a psychologist, even like I said, developing the backstory. We all have to do this while tracking and keeping within a tight budget to keep the producers and studio happy. So what is my creative process, and how is a set or location made ready for filming? Well, everything we do starts with the script. Then we do a set breakdown where we look at the big picture of all the sets we have to create and figure out a schedule for all of it to hopefully fall in place with deadlines, budgeting concerns, and getting our crew together. Then the production designer will often sketch an idea for what each set will look like. I'll show you some beautiful examples of this in a bit. Once the vision is decided on, the art director and set designer generates technical construction documents or blueprints that has the exact measurements and details we all need to construct the set. How big the doors are, where the windows are, how tall the walls are, etc. Then the construction team builds the walls, the floors, and sometimes the ceilings if needed. Then the fun part. The set decorator and his or her team is responsible for locating and placing all the items needed to make that set or location come to life. The rugs, the furniture, the window treatments, the lighting, the artwork, all of the small knickknacks placed around the room. Or if it's a super technical set like an airplane cockpit or a spaceship, we'll often have to have the consoles or those interactive surfaces custom made. But before we delve into those specific nitty-gritty details of the set, we compile an intense amount of research. And we print tons and tons of reference photos that we plaster all around our office walls for inspiration. We obtain research wherever we can get it, really, from books to magazines and newspaper articles, online researching, going on research trips and traveling to get inspired. Researching really never ends. And as filmmakers, the more we can observe and the more we can travel and study different places and cultures, the better visual storytellers will be. So now is a good time to show an example of the production design and set decorating process in detail. We'll look at a quick little presentation on the Conspirator that I worked on back in 2010. For a quick recap, this is a true story directed by Robert Redford following the assassination of President Lincoln, focusing on 7 men and 1 woman who were tried and convicted for conspiring to kill him, as well as other government officials. It's told from the perspective of a lawyer assigned to the case, and Mary Surratt, who ran the boarding house where the conspirators took refuge throughout the story. Now, the story takes place in Washington, D.C. in 1865, and as we all know, modern-day D.C. bears almost no resemblance to 1865 D.C. So when you need an authentic-looking mid to late 19th century city that offers a variety of public and private architecture and access to period interiors, the only place that made sense to the producers was Savannah. This is the Harper Folks House in Orleans Square, and we turned it into the Century Club of DC. This is the place where Union soldiers and lawyers would hang out drinking and impressing the ladies. One of the challenges was taking down all of the modern day amenities of Savannah, like parking meters, street signs, cars, power lines, and replacing the halogen street lights with gas lamps. We also mulched over all the streets to be historically accurate. Something else, DC would not have palm trees or tropical looking plants that Savannah is known for, so all those had to be replaced with native DC plants and trees. This is a shot of the interior set. We brought in everything you see from the custom carpet and custom made drapery to match the real Century Club location back in DC. So with these period projects, they generally involve a lot more research than contemporary ones because we can't just rely on our buddy Google for quick answers. Photography was just coming around at this time, so we had to rely heavily on paintings, sketches, lithographs, and personal accounts in newspapers so we could get a well-rounded idea of what was going on. And crazy fact is we only had 7 weeks of pre-production to immerse ourselves in this research and create all of these sets. For the Ford's theater scenes, we actually went to DC on a quick research trip and went to the actual locations from the story, taking photos and doing our own sketches. This was a painting in a museum of the moment right after the president was assassinated. The designer loved the emotion in it so much, it was our main inspiration for our set back in Savannah. On this movie, the production designer was amazing at sketching out her ideas in a beautifully romantic way like this one. Not all designers do this, however. Sometimes they just hand us something scribbled out on a napkin. These convey so much info, though, like the mood of the scene, how dense or sparse extras will be, set pieces needed, and even basic lighting suggestions from the DP and rigging team. This is also a great way for the designer to show ideas to the director to make sure everyone's on board with our vision. And then this is a screen grab from the movie of what the set ended up looking like. It's almost an exact recreation of the real event from our DC research trip and the production designer sketch. For the interior of the theater, we did find a couple good reference photos just before the theater burned down in 1893 that we used to rebuild the theater on the soundstage, and which it resulted in this. We only built these 2 walls that you see here because all the camera angles were from this direction. We had to guesstimate the size of the set and set pieces just off those 3 or 4 photos we found, but I think we got pretty close. Here's another historical photo showing the presidential box, and then with our spin on it, a screen grab from the set from the movie. It's a little blurry, sorry.
Can I ask you a quick question there, Dustin?
Yes.
The use of models, how common is that within your practice? Do you use that on a regular basis, or is that a luxury, or do you find that helpful?
You said models?
Yeah, models. Yeah.
You say that because that's the next slide.
Perfect.
So we do use these 3D models a lot, especially if there's complicated scenes or action stunts that requires a lot of collaboration between multiple departments. The art department will produce these models from the set the set designer and the art director's blueprints. It's a great tool for the director of photography, the stunt coordinator, grips, etc., to figure out how to do their jobs within the set. The director can also use it as a great blocking and staging tool for the actors. So this is another great visual pre-planning tool that we use way before filming begins. And over there on the right, you can see John Wilkes Booth sort of falling out of the box to show some of the action that had to take place. This is a real photo of Mary Surratt's boarding house back in DC in 1865. And our locations department found a pretty close match. Some of you might recognize this. It's Chatham Square row houses in Savannah. Once again, we had to take all of these street scenes back to 1865, stripped of all modern day resemblances. These next few slides are set photos of the interior of the boarding house. Often when we film in someone's real home or a functioning business, we have to take all the furnishings out and bring in our chosen set pieces. In this case, again, everything had to be historically accurate down to the oil lamps on the side tables. Whoops. This is a view looking from the living room into the dining room. And then I thought I'd throw this cool shot of Robert Redford directing James McAvoy in the scene. And then this is a good example of how set lighting can really enhance the mood and tone of a scene. Almost all of our interior sets were completely lit with actual candlelight to be historically accurate. This added a great warm glow on set as well as the actors' faces. Set design details like this really help the actors get into character and to do their jobs effectively. A lot of the second half of this movie takes place in a courtroom for the trial of the conspirators that we built on a soundstage on the south side of Savannah. There were no real photos of this actual event, so we had to rely on illustrations from newspapers and lithographs. We thankfully found this old courtroom layout from a newspaper article that ended up being the driving force for our furniture layout and also our set design blueprint. And we found this great little lithograph from the Library of Congress that showed us what the lighting looked like, the furniture, the costuming, the level of chaos on the tables, etc. Once again, the production designer, after the research phase, did a beautiful sketch showing her vision for this scene, so you can sort of see how it's all compiled into one cohesive vision. And then after the sketch, sorry, this is a little pixelated, the overall tone is decided in the sketch, and then the set designer and art director provides these construction documents to build the sets from. This was the actual courtroom floor plan, which then transitions into, sometimes we use 3D models like this one in SketchUp. This is another way for us to visually communicate set details. It's another great way for directors to pre-plan how they're going to navigate their story in a set digitally. So that's some SketchUp views of the courtroom before we bring in all the furniture and stuff. And then here you have the finished set in filming with the extras and everyone in there. And then here is a reverse shot looking the other direction. And oops. Lastly, spoiler alert, for the ending of the movie, we had to recreate the gallows or the hanging scene. We found these great lithographs showing the gallows and the conspirators heading toward their fate. This is another one from the Library of Congress. This is all we went off of in one photo. This is one of the few photos that took place just moments before they were hung. Once again, the production designer married our research, the articles, and the real photos and made another awesome sketch for the set. Then here's the set. We filmed this out at Fort Pulaski, like you're going out toward Tybee, and it was almost identical to the real deal. What better way to see all this hard work in action and how it all melded together than to watch the movie trailer. Let me flip over here.
Lincoln's been shot.
One bullet may have killed our beloved president, but not one man.
You are charged with having received, entertained, harbored, aided, and assisted John Wilkes Booth, John A. Surratt, and their confederates in traitorous and murderous conspiracy to kill Abraham Lincoln, Vice President Andrew Johnson, and Secretary of State William Seward. How do you plead?
I am innocent.
Well, the trial of the conspirators begins today. What are we going to do? Defend one of the eight.
Her son John was Bruce red-handed.
You're saying that you've been charged with? Found guilty, you could hang?
I am a Southerner and a devoted mother, but I am no assassin.
Your son was the only one who got away.
These are despicable people, the same circle you risked your life fighting against.
Someone must be held accountable. People want that. A military trial of civilians is an atrocity.
No, what she did is an atrocity.
To ensure his survival of this nation, I would do anything.
You have to tell us where your son is. Whose side are you on?
Trying to defend you.
You're trying to save you.
Were there ever meetings held at the boarding house? Many always in secret.
You lie. My mother is innocent.
He moved on in that courtroom.
You set the rules, pick the judges. There was no limit to how far the prosecution is willing to go.
You tell John Surratt, unless he surrenders, his mother will be punished for his crimes.
Have you ever cared for something greater than yourself?
Our
founding fathers drafted a constitution precisely for times like this. Do not permit this injustice out of revenge.
So now, if we have time, let's switch gears and I'll show you a quick presentation on a more current show you're probably familiar with its own unique set of design challenges. And it was a Netflix series called The Haunting of Hill House. So this show is a perfect example of production design and set decorating playing a crucial role and working hand in hand in the storytelling process, and one of my favorites that I've worked on. It follows the Crane family, a group of siblings who as children grew up in what would go on to become the most famous haunted house in the country. Now adults, they are forced back together in the face of tragedy and must finally confront the ghost of their past. Some of these ghosts still lurk in their minds, while others may actually be stalking the shadows of Hill House itself. This project was a set decorator's dream because the central location, the house, was the star of the show. A living, decomposing, perturbing character in and to itself. The Hill House is a great example of how human psychology and emotions like fear and unrest can be the fuel and driving force to guide our creative process. Another previs tool that decorators and designers use to convey our process is through mood boards like this. The designer and DP put these together to start the dialogue of what the mood, tone, and even preliminary shot ideas for the exterior of the house could be. This is also a great reference for the lighting and camera departments to start formulating their ideas. For the exterior of the house, we filmed a real mansion in LaGrange, Georgia, and then we did a few artistic tweaks, brought in plants and stuff like that. But we built the entire interior of the house on a soundstage, which turned out being a whopping 15,000 square foot set. Mood boards like this are great for us to take to production meetings to make sure we're all on the same page way before construction begins and we start spending the studio's money. It's another great visualization tool for us to have in our tool chest. Our director, Mike Flanagan, loves Stanley Kubrick films, as I'm sure a lot of you do too, especially The Shining, as you can see references here. And this turned out to be a lot of inspiration for our project. These boards convey a lot of information to me, like textures, wallpapers, lighting, even camera techniques and angles like extreme depth of field shots. As we delve into the final sets that we ended up with for the show, I think you'll see how helpful these previs concepts and conversations were that took place way before set construction began. Part of my job is doing furniture plans for sets, especially for a set this large. Like I said, we built a 15,000 square foot mansion from the ground up. Just to give you an idea of scale, it had 120 foot long hallways, fireplaces you could stand inside of, and 7 fully decorated bedrooms. It was massive and required a ton of pre-planning. So before I start the shopping phase, I get a floor plan from the art director and I lay a piece of trace paper on it and sort of draw out what I think makes sense for the furniture to the scale of the house. This tells me if I need a 4-foot rug versus a 40-foot rug. All of the big items get drawn in each room. This is helpful in this pre-production phase to see what fits and doesn't fit, how much set dressing we need to shop for, and it also helps us figure out our budget in this initial phase. Once again, we had to do a ton of research to decide how to tackle this beast of a house. The plan was to create a robber baron style mansion of the late 19th century where These people with immense fortunes were trying to bring in the old world and riches into their home, which results in all sorts of mixed styles and periods. We mixed Gothic with Baroque, Moorish with Victorian, and so on. There were even hints of the early 90s throughout the house, as all the scenes with the kids took place in 1992. The director wanted to create an uneasy subconscious feeling for the audience. He kept calling it a schizophrenic experience. So us dappling in and marrying all these different architectural styles and periods really helped us achieve that, creating somewhat of an aesthetic interior discord. For instance, this is the board we put together for the living room. The designer loved all of these Gothic cathedral-like arches and ornate carved details and wanted to showcase them in his design. One day, the director made a comment to us that he would love to add an additional layer of fear somehow, as if no matter where you were in the house, someone or something was always watching you. Boy, did we take this idea and run with it. The designer had the construction team carve scary faces into fireplace mantles and wood columns all throughout the house. There was an entire hallway of wild animal taxidermy heads. It didn't make it into the show, though, for some reason. While on this slide, I want to point out that we chose a color palette of deep, rich, saturated jewel tones for the house to starkly contrast the color palette of the other main set of the show, which was Shirley's Home and Harris Funeral Home, which consisted of beiges and soft blues and greens. So with color palette alone, we showed a stark contrast in the two sets. I carried the wildlife and faces motif into the set pieces, like this Victorian sofa with baboons carved in the legs, cherubs on tapestries on the walls, antique dolls and toys sitting in creepy corners of the rooms. And not that you can notice it on screen, but even our doorknobs and desk pulls had faces carved in them to make it seem like the children were constantly being watched inside this house. Through details like this, we were able to help the director and the designer achieve the emotion they were going for, not just for the audience, but for the actors as well. And then this is little Luke and Nell's bedroom, and one of my favorites that we did. I ran all over Atlanta in thrift stores, estate sales, yard sales, and antique stores to find those perfect, creepy, strange dolls and toys to put in all the children's rooms. One of my favorites were those ceramic Raggedy Ann and Andy lamps that you can see on the bedside tables there in the lower left photo with Nell. Those were pretty creepy. It's interesting to note that the construction of this house was extremely unique and not the industry norm. Typically, when dealing with a multi-story house, we would build each level as a standalone set, usually side by side one another on the soundstage. The Hill House levels were actually stacked on top of each other like a real house would be constructed. The designer built it this way so the DP and the director could do long continuous shots, allowing the actors to run from room to room and weave throughout the levels of the house, tracking down long hallways and corridors, allowing for a very long depth of field and extremely long shots without breaks in action. And I'm not sure if you've seen the show, but our 6th episode was an entire 2-shot episode. We did a 45-minute episode in just 2 shots. It was nominated for awards. You can look it up later. This long depth of field brilliantly allowed for the countless ghosts and spirits that would peer in and out of the background. There were over 150 of them throughout the season, and I've circled some examples here and in the next slide. No matter how many times you watch the show, me included, I still notice new ones. Often the cast did not even know that these ghosts were in the scenes as their scene partners behind them, which added even more of a creep factor to the show. And then real quick, I want to discuss my favorite part of the Hill House, and it's because of how we dealt with it. It was the Red Room scenes. Another spoiler alert, Basically, the red room is where the house feeds on the emotions and fears of its potential victims. It's like the heart or stomach of the house, and they explain in the series finale of how all this works together. But several times in the season, we hear that Hill House wants to eat its inhabitants, and it would do this by tricking the victims into a false sense of security by showing them what they wanted to see to put them at ease. So we had to come up with 5 different variations visually for this red room, as it would be a different iteration for each character that was inside of it. As you find out in the finale, these rooms were only hallucinations of the children's imaginations. They're safe spaces that they would escape to when the house was being nutso. It was Luke's tree house. It was Nell's toy room. It was Stephen's game room and Shirley's family room. And if you notice, there's 2 unifying design elements in each room. One is that tall, slender center window within each variation. And the second is we always placed an obvious red item in each room. In Luke's treehouse, it was the red trap door. The toy chest down there in Nell's toy room, the bean bag in Stephen's room, and so on. And then here is the last time we see the red room, where the mom, Olivia, is planning on killing her children by serving them a tea party of rat poison. The house has completely possessed her at this point, and it's quite obvious the nods again to Kubrick's Clockwork Orange reference in costuming, as well as the Shining's bathroom color palette. And then the last thing that I want to touch on is the process that we went through for the scenes where we see the house in utter decay and decomposition, if you will. This was our research board for the level of decay that we wanted to achieve. Torn wallpapers, holes in the walls, pretty much architectural chaos. The challenge was that we see the house in this state of disarray multiple times throughout the season. It would be almost impossible due to time and labor for the set decorating team to keep switching back and forth between the house in its normal lived-in state versus this dark and disheveled state. So we filmed all of the decrepit scenes at the end of our shooting schedule, and then the directors and editor came in and did their magic, splicing it all together where it made sense in the season. And I might note that for this dismantlement of the house, it involved a great deal of collaboration between the art department, the construction and greens department, the paint department, and then the visual effects and CGI team. And if we have time, like we did before, I'd like to show the series trailer real quick so you can see how it all comes together.
Yes, please.
And I want you two to get good rest.
What if I have a bad dream?
Well, I'm sure we can handle any dream you have.
What if I dream that you sent us away into the dark and we get hurt? Really hurt? And what if I'm so sad and scared of the dark out there that I put poison in me for years and years until my blood turns into poison and my heart breaks right in half and I can't feel anything happen. I can't stand it anymore and I have to die. Until I'm on a silver table. It's my jaw wired shut. Would you wake us up from a dream like that?
We're not like any other family. We're different because of where we grew up. Hill House.
Your mother, she was not crazy.
Neither was your sister, neither is your brother, neither are you. It's that house.
You don't have to worry now, sweetie. That really bad dream? Of course I'd wake you.
Still gives me the creeps when I see it. All right, that's all I have, Carl. If you wanted to ask some questions.
Absolutely, that's amazing. Thank you so much, though, Dustin, for that. We really appreciate it. We'll start off with the poll question. So the question that most people wanted to hear you talk a little bit more about was how you create story and vision boards on a project.
Well, like I said, everything starts in that script. We'll take the information that's in there, and then what's not called out, the set decorating team in the art department will sit down and figure out what all elements we need to bring into the set based out of our research. I'll go out in the field and I'll collect fabric samples or flooring samples or whatever, and we start to develop a color palette from that. We'll start printing reference pictures and we'll sort of organize it by set on the walls. And then I might find a few key pieces like a sofa or a really cool desk. We'll print that, throw that on there, and that'll sort of serve as a reference point for the smaller items that we have to go out and find later.
And do you tend to carry, you know, little sketchbooks around? You take photographs as you move through your work? Do you collect all of that?
I usually, whatever documents the art department has distroed, like whether it's a furniture plan or a sketch, I'll always have that on me to reference it when I'm out shopping for certain items. And then as I'm shopping, I will constantly take pictures so then I can come back and show them to the designers, see what they respond to. And then based on their comments, that really helps me narrow my focus of what direction to go in.
Excellent. And a question that a lot of people have asked looking through the chat is, what kind of computer programs do you use most often? Do you use things like SketchUp or Vectorworks? What's your most common program?
Me specifically, I just use, if I'm putting together a digital board, I'll use any of the Adobe softwares. Like sometimes we'll use Photoshop if we need to, tweak an image or add a sketch on top of a photograph, or we'll use Illustrator or InDesign to make digital mood boards. But as far as our set designers or art directors, they use a lot of SketchUp because it's easy for you to, for a director to sit beside them and they can, walk through the set digitally and they can really get an aspect of what it's going to be. And then of course, AutoCAD to generate the actual technical construction plans. So those are our main softwares.
Okay. There's a question here from Ephraim Oliver. Are you in the room? Would you like to ask your question directly to Dustin? Don't worry, if not, I'll ask it for you. Okay, I'm going to ask it. So, there we go, Ephraim, there you go. Go ahead, ask your question.
It was a while ago, but I think my question was, what is it like to work on like big movies like Captain America, Civil War? Do you find that there's more like creative constraints when like working under a big behemoth like Disney? Or was sort of my question.
You nailed it on the head, yes. I've noticed working on bigger productions versus smaller ones is we have almost little leeway in what we can do or who we answer to on those big productions. Because with like a Disney or a Marvel movie, we sort of follow a certain formula that's expected, and you have to make sure you're hitting certain studio tick marks versus an independent movie like The Conspirator that I showed. We have much more leeway to take creative license and sort of, show what we want as far as the visuals go. But like Disney and Marvel, they require a lot of previs documents to make sure we are showing what they want for the studio. Like we have to put together an entire lookbook that shows every scene, what it's going to look like with a lot of detail before they'll sign off on it. And we don't have to do that necessarily for the smaller shows.
Which one do you prefer?
I prefer the ones where we have more artistic freedom and we have less people to answer to, because no artist wants to be restrained with your thoughts and approaches. But the big shows also can give you a lot more money to make bigger things that you might not be able to do on the smaller ones. So each one has its pros and cons, really.
We have a question from Landon Rosenbaum. Are you there?
Yep.
Hey, go for it, Landon.
So I was wondering how you create a set that is visually interesting without distracting from the characters who are going to be the main focus.
Oh, I think when we, in the pre-vis phase or the pre-production phase, when we're figuring out the backstories for those actors, because pretty much we are designing the space for them to function and do their job. So anything we do, we try to take note that we should not be adding stuff that's going to detract from the scene or from the dialogue. So that goes back to what I said. When we're making our choices, we really want to make sure that we think that's what the character would make in his or her actual life. And we always say in this business, if you don't notice the set dressing or the set decorating, then we've done our jobs correctly. If it doesn't take you out of the story, then we've done it just right. So, and sometimes we over decorate and we put too many items in, and then the director gets there and shooting crew and they call for us to come in and make a lot of last minute changes, which is always interesting. And we sometimes have to pull back some of the stuff that we've put in there to showcase the actors and what they're doing.
Okay, and Ria Menon, could we do your question if you're out there?
Yes, I'm here. I was wondering how sustainable is the set design industry, considering that you keep building and taking down sets so often?
That is a good question. Well, it's sort of a difference, once again, between a big studio movie versus more of an independent project. A lot of the studios, I know Sony and NBC, or Universal, they're both good at having a sustainability department and sort of a person that comes on each production to make sure that we're not printing things that we don't need to be, making sure that we try to reuse set pieces as much as possible. Or if there's a Sony movie that's finishing and they know another one's coming into Atlanta, they'll see if that new show can use any of the props or some of the construction pieces in whatever they're using. So people are starting to think about it a lot more, as they should be, and try to be as green as possible. But of course, there is some waste that goes into making movies.
Right, thank you.
Yeah.
Great for you to be thinking about it though, Ria. Really, really good stuff. So, Ariella Spencer, can we go to you? Ariel, are you in the room?
Yeah, I'm here.
Go for it.
So I was asking about how you research some of the more small details, especially in a period piece. For example, like plugs or light switches, or just very, very kind of mundane things that might not have as much documentation.
That's a good question. So specifically, like for Hidden Figures or The Conspirator, we'll bring all those pictures together, especially ones that show furniture or even costuming. We'll zoom in as much as possible digitally to see as much as we can gather. And then I have some contacts specifically in LA that specialize in selling or renting antique fixtures and light switches. And if I have questions, I will often call them and say, we're doing a 1960s NASA office. What would you suggest for this, this certain light fixture? And then they'll send me options. Or sometimes if it's a technical show, like The Resident that I'm on, I am no expert in all the medical machinery and stuff needed in a hospital. So often we'll bring on a technical advisor that I can be like, okay, what kinds of instruments would make sense in an OR versus a hospital room? So sometimes we do have to branch outside of our little network for industry people to tell us, what we should do.
Thank you.
Okay. And Jude Ashley, let's go straight to you next, if that's okay.
Hello.
Hey, Jude.
So what is a very important thing you learned from the industry that helped you to succeed and improve in future projects?
And I'm going to put it back on networking. Each project leads to the next one based on who I've just worked with or how good of a job I did. And they're going to call that previous boss to see if they should hire me or if I'm crazy. So really maintaining a good name for yourself has really taught me a lot in this business. I've seen people not get hired just because they upset one person in the past. So maintaining that professionalism really, really has paid off.
So reputation does matter.
100%. As well as your technical skills that you know and being creative, but it really matters a lot.
All right.
On that note, a common question that we're being asked is about collaboration. Can you tell us about who you collaborate with most on the set and what that looks like?
Typically, I'm not there when the shooting crew's there. I'm usually 3 or 4 days ahead of the shooting schedule, setting up whatever the set is. So the people that I'm usually around or I have to collaborate with is the props department. Overlap between what an actor touches and then what we bring in. Everything else is set dressing. So oftentimes we have to make sure we're on the same page. We have to make sure we're on the same page with the art department who's generating all this information that's dictating what we do. The director, well, my boss speaks directly to the director and the designer along the way to make sure that we're fulfilling what their vision is in the story. So it's usually the creative people that we're really chatting with constantly. And the DP. The DP has very specific lighting requirements. Like some of them prefer LED lights versus halogen. And we have to make sure that we are providing the right information for them to be able to do what they need to do.
We've got time maybe for 2 more questions. I've got one from Madonna Myers at the moment. Go for it, Madonna.
Howdy. So, my question was, do you usually work with the same people like, do you have a director or someone who like has you on speed dial, or do you usually work with new people for each project?
It's a good question. So mostly, I'm a freelance worker, as all of us will be in film most likely. So I have to almost search for the next job after each one is ending. But once you have several under your belt and you've developed that, networking thing I was talking about, then those people will most likely call you for future projects. But typically, each group that I work with is a whole brand new group of people. But sometimes, if a boss that I've worked with previously is coming back to Savannah or Atlanta to film a movie and they liked me, they'll often call me to work with them again. But Atlanta has such a huge crew base that we're seeing new people all the time.
We're going to jump to Claire Combs now. Claire, you've got a question about historical sets. Are you there, Claire?
Yes, I'm here.
Go for it.
Okay, so I was wondering how many artistic liberties you take when designing historical sets. Like, do you usually aim for complete historical accuracy, or which parts do you kind of give leeway on?
We have to, sometimes, especially with the historical ones, we're not going to find reference for every single decision that we make. As long as we are within that tone and vision of the designer and director, then we have to take some liberties in what we're showing. But we try to get as close as possible based off of whatever reference we can find. But yeah, there's always going to be times where we just have to make a quick decision based on what feels right in our gut, pretty much. But the pre-production schedule is usually very fast. Like I said, we did a Conspirator in 7 weeks. So we have to make decisions and, some liberties very quickly.
Let's squeeze in another question from Sophia. Sophia Valderrama, are you there?
Hi, yeah, I was wondering how you communicate with the cities when you're doing historical sets, like to take down all the posts and the signs and all of that, how that worked.
That's a good question. That is actually a separate department from me called the locations department. It's a whole different team of people, and they usually come on way before my department does to handle stuff like this, where they will go to, usually each city will have like a film commission or a film office where that will be the liaison between the production and the shooting crew. And the locations team will go there, tell them our plan, and get permits in place. And then our team or either the city's team will work with us in taking down whatever we need to do. But the locations department really works with the city way before we get there to make those decisions and make sure that it's all falling within place. So I typically don't see a lot of that. It's done before I get there.
Fantastic. Just before we do, we're going to do one last question, but just before we do that, I want to say that this has been recorded. So if you want to go back and review what's been discussed, or if you've got people that you think might want to take a look, do take a look on the Guests and Gusto website. You can go back and see the recording. But Daphne Colson, you helped me out at the start of this when we lost Dustin for a second. So you get the last question. Go for it, Daphne.
Thank you, Daphne.
Hi, Dustin. I'm a senior at SCAD in production design. And my question was, what has been your biggest set that has your biggest design challenge so far?
That's a good one. The biggest set that I've had to do, the Hill House was one of them. But then on Jumanji, the first one, I don't know if you saw it, we had to create a huge outdoor Moroccan bazaar that was the length of 2 football fields in an abandoned parking lot here in Atlanta. So we had to bring in about 200 vendor booths with like livestock running around and like heads, like weird items, bats and everything else. And we had to go to a lot of detail and a lot of planning. But you can see it, there's a big fight action scene in the movie that takes place in that bazaar. But we worked on that for about 2 months straight and spent about 300 grand on just that one set for set decorating.
Wow. Thank you.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much, Dustin, for such an absolutely fantastic presentation today. Really great insights into what you were showing us there. But thank you again, everybody, for joining us. Please join us on Thursday at 3 p.m. We've got somebody coming in to talk about the next Netflix series, Outer Banks, with Madeline Klein. So thank you so much for joining us today. Enjoy the rest of your day. Do come and check out the recording, and we'll see you all very soon. Thanks so much, everybody.